Hey Sprouts, during the months of June and July, we will not be having new content here on the Catholic Sprouts podcast. Instead, we will be revisiting some of my favorite weeks of content. And here is one of those weeks. Enjoy! You're listening to
Catholic Sprouts,
the daily podcast for Catholic kids that strives to plant seeds of faith. Hey there, Sprouts. Today is Thursday, November 22nd, 2018. It is Thanksgiving Day here in the United States, and around the world in all Catholic churches, today is the feast of one of my favorite saints, Saint Cecilia. This week on the Catholic Sprouts podcast, we have been talking about thankfulness, but we have been talking about thankfulness the right way, a way that includes God. First, we talked about how thankfulness only makes sense with God. The next day, we talked about how it would be plain crazy not to thank God for the wonderful things in our life, because refusing to thank Him is saying that I somehow am responsible for all these blessings. And that's just crazy. Yesterday, we talked about all that we have to be thankful for in our Catholic faith, most especially our advocate, our friend, and our mother, Mary. Today, we are going to take a lesson from Saint Cecilia. Saint Cecilia is a wonderful example for how we need to remain joyful and thankful, even when things are terrible. Now, here's a little bit about Saint Cecilia. Saint Cecilia lived in Rome a long time ago. She was part of the early church. In fact, she was Christian when it was a very dangerous thing to be a Christian. The Roman officials persecuted the Christians, and if you were caught practicing the faith, you were punished and oftentimes put to death. Nevertheless, Saint Cecilia loved her faith and continued to worship God. In Rome, still to this day, there are tunnels under the city called the catacombs. The catacombs were used as places to bury the dead, and they're oftentimes to this day still full of skeletons and skulls. Now, it's kind of a creepy place to be. For this reason, most Romans didn't go there very often, so the early Christians used the catacombs as a place to worship. They gathered there to say Mass and also to bury their dead. Very often their friends, their fellow Christians were caught and killed. So while celebrating Mass, they would also say goodbye to their beloved friends. Now, Saint Cecilia was down there one day when she was caught by a Roman official, and we all know what happened to her. Saint Cecilia was taken, she was sentenced to execution, and yet through it all, Saint Cecilia remained joyful. She sang songs of praise and thanksgiving to God. Even as the executioner sharpened the blade that was to be used to cut off her head, she sang. With the first strike of the executioner's blade, he didn't even cut her. Miraculously, God had protected her. But God would not spare her from all suffering. The executioner was forced to try again and again, and yet she continued to sing. The executioner was unable to kill Saint Cecilia that day, but she left, and her wounds were so serious that she did die soon. And yet through it all, Saint Cecilia sang to God. She praised Him and she thanked Him. And even though her life was being taken from her, she longed to be in heaven with the great and wonderful God of complete goodness. Because Saint Cecilia sang, she is now the patron saint of musicians and of music. She is a beautiful saint and a wonderful reminder that we not only need to be thankful when things are good, we also need to be thankful when things aren't so good. And so, Sprouts, here is my challenge for you today. Because it is the Feast of St. Cecilia and because it is Thanksgiving in the U.S., I want you to listen to some beautiful music. That's it. Just listen to some beautiful music. And while you're listening to it, thank God for your ability to hear it. Thank God for the musicians that were able to make this music. And just thank God for music itself, because all of these things are gifts from God. That's it for Catholic Sprouts today. We'll be back tomorrow, but until then, continue to grow in your faith and truly sprout into the beautiful creation that God intended you to be. And finally, a quick heads up to the parents. As we work our way through November, we of course are looking forward to December and Advent. Here on the Catholic Sprouts podcast, we will be spending all of Advent exploring the Jesse tree, meaning we will be talking about many of Jesus' ancestors as a way to prepare our hearts to welcome him at Christmas. If you would like to explore the Jesse tree even further at home with your family, I encourage you to look into a beautiful new resource. It's a devotional book for Catholic families that explores the Jesse tree. It takes the stress off of you, gives lots of biblical context, and also is designed to truly teach children about the amazing plan that God has had in place for our salvation from the very, very beginning. To explore this book and the ornaments that go with it, head to DoSmallThingsWithLove /Jesse-Tree.